A few days ago, I wrote about the Rolex Milguass, a watch that I really appreciate, especially the Z Blue model, as an example of a watch that throws caution to the wind. The discussion looked at the development of the line and finally focused on the modern iterations and how the models were reintroduced with exciting color variations. Throughout the discussion, I wanted to highlight the Omega Aqua Terra as its rival, but one thing led to another, and deep down, I didn't want to steal Rolex's limelight in the discussion. But now it is time to turn to the Aqua Terra and look at what it offers. Now, to many, this watch is seen as a piece that competes against the likes of the Rolex Datejust, but I disagree. I feel that the Aqua Terra is placed in such a way to compete against the entire line of Rolex models in that class, including the likes of the Explorer, the Air King, and the Milguass. It is an interesting thought, one watch that takes on such a broad range of pieces in the Rolex family. Does it have the potential to do so? And the pressing question is, does the Aqua Terra have the ability to beat them all? Placing these three pieces side by side, design-wise, they could not be further apart from one another. And by that I mean the inspiration behind these pieces come from a completely different place. The Datejust, classical styling, classically proportioned, based off a typical oyster case construction. The bezels are smooth or fluted, the dials come in a wash of finishes and materials. The indices sometimes come as batons, Roman numerals, or Arabic numerals. The crystal has a Cyclops lens, an admittedly old-fashioned but effective magnifier for the date complication that gave this watch its iconic status. And then the bracelets, the typical pairing is a jubilee, so the Datejust comes from a place where dress is important. This piece initially was focused on the formal. Then the Explorer, again classically styled and proportioned, based on the same typical oyster case construction. The bezel is smooth and the dial, in matte black, combines numerals and batons, creating a piece that seamlessly blends formality with sport. In essence, this is why the watch is so loved and appreciated as a perfect one watch for most enthusiasts. It is quintessential Rolex, but at the same time would never look out of place. With all of that said though, the watch is still classically inspired. Now to the Aqua Terra. This piece immediately says something different. It leans further towards being a sports watch than a formal watch. Where the underlying theme of the Explorer and the Datejust could be described as placid, the underlying theme of the Aqua Terra is aggression. It doesn't take a critical eye to see it. Just looking at the case and the beautiful turned-in lugs that has made the Omega cases so famous, paired with the indices that play off a similar styling that look like shark teeth, a great callback to the vintage Seamasters of the past. One key feature that I enjoy about this watch is the way that the crown recesses into the case, in a way avoiding the need for crown guards. And in the end, the watch has that aggressive edginess that I feel the Rolex pieces lack in this category. And when seeing the watches side by side again, the Omega, though inspired by vintage elements, to me, visually appears a more modern watch. A better comparison. There is one Aqua Terra model that has always interested me, and it ties in directly with the Rolex Milguass. The Aqua Terra greater than 15,000 Gauss, which I will just call the 15,000. This watch is still the epitome of excellence in the Aqua Terra line to me, and if I had to buy one myself, this would be the watch. It is gorgeous, and I say that because it is a watch that not only pairs with activity and sport, but has a touch of formality to it as well. When looking at the color combinations and the pinstriping texture on the dial, it also has that intention of being something more of a utility and less of being a piece of jewelry. The colors and the choice of colors make it all the more interesting, and I'm not sure that many of us would deny that this watch has one of the most attractive seconds hands ever made. So I want to center around this piece and the Milguass because they both share similar traits. They are both bold and daring with their color choices, but at the same time are designed with completely different approaches. In the description I will link to an excellent article done by Jack Forster of Hodinkee comparing these two watches and their anti-magnetic properties. In summary, they both hold up to extreme magnetism that the casual wearer would never experience unless they were in an MRI machine with the watch on. In the corner now, I will link to my recent video on the Milguass, which has some history and more details that might not be mentioned in this discussion. But purely from a design approach, these two watches are fascinating to study, and this is why Omega and Rolex share such an interesting rivalry. Both know what they are doing, both know where they are going, but they take different routes. Where Rolex in this example sticks to the traditional case design but is flamboyant with their dials and color choices, the Aqua Terra has a more sports-oriented case design and a subtle but exciting dial. Which watch has a better dial layout? It is difficult to say, but you will find this interesting. The second hand of the Milguass is a lightning bolt. Yes, it is cartoonish. It has a long history of being integral to the watch, and the modern piece's color choice is quite brash. But the lightning bolt, an example of visual storytelling, signifies a simple icon of electricity, paired with the name 1000 Gauss, and most would be able to determine that it has something to do with magnetism. The zirconium blue dial, paired with the green crystal, makes it visually exciting. And like I said in the previous video, I like the idea that it conveys an approach of different light rays that we cannot see, like gamma radiation, for example. Then looking at how the Aqua Terra has approached it. As most professional watches should express the details on their dials, this piece highlights its specifications at the bottom in bold yellow text, very similar to how tritium dials were signified back in the day with the less than 25 sign at the base of their dials. And instead of taking the literal approach of using something like a lightning bolt or a magnet counterbalance on the seconds hand, it opts for contrasting black and yellow bars. This is a subtle signifier. In industry, those colors usually symbolize caution or danger in a working environment. For example, look at how biohazards are represented, or how safety tape appears. So what does this color mean on the Omega? It tells the observer that it is a professional's watch, a watch built for industry that could be taken into a hazardous environment. At the same time, it also gives a subtle reminder that cautions the user. Both watches are stunning. Both convey a sense of understanding of their purpose. But in a strange twist that seldom happens, Rolex, after having the professional Milguass in their catalogue for over 50 years, uses this example and takes it playfully. This never happens with modern Rolex pieces, and I believe it is partly the reason why the modern Milguass is a polarizing watch. But Omega has taken this process seriously from start to finish, and really pulls it off well. Everything from the use of colors to the layout of the dial and the form factor of the watch screams professional. So I wanted to highlight this because in this small niche of professional watches, they can both be appreciated by how they approached the theme. Each chose colors and highlights that represent the subject, and it just goes to show that both can pull it off well. In the end, it really is up to you to decide on what works best. Getting back to the overall design of the Aqua Terra, it is clear that these pieces have taken their inspiration from vintage Seamasters of the past. The bezels, for example, are slim and remain in the background, allocating more space for the dial to take preference. The lugs are fat in width, but the way they have been polished and shaped allows them to meld well into the bracelet architecture. The case profile is slim, but could be improved. And where some, me included, find the repetitive use of the Mercedes hands on the Rolex models to be a bit yawn-inducing at times, a broad arrow hand never gets old, and it complements the indices well. Another great added touch are the numerals linked to the batons around the dial. Great use of architecture for that open space. Nowadays there are so many models to choose from, everything from dates to day dates, GMTs, and world times, casually. Two-tone models, models on leather straps and rubber straps. There is an Aqua Terra for any situation. And this is what makes the watch buyer excited, the opportunity for choice. For an enthusiast or a first-time buyer, this model offers so much room for customization. The new iterations now use Meta-certified calibers that are phenomenal, without a doubt one of the best in the industry, and being coaxial movements, it's just another edge it has over the conventional escapements. Also, I'll add that all of their new movements now come with a standard magnetic resistance of over 15,000 Gauss. The latest iterations now subtly place the date complication at the 6 o'clock position and match the color to the dial. And there is always an element of balance with their choices of how they lay out their dials. Simple but refined. The white dial XF piece with the orange seconds hand is the epitome of their modern line to me, and it looks absolutely brilliant. The contrast between the orange, the grey of the numerals, and the texture on the dial, paired with the brown leather strap, it's very exciting. That is what I would like to hammer home. These pieces are exciting. Like I have said countless times before, no product is truly perfect. It does not mean that a product cannot near perfection. And in the case of the dials of the Aqua Terras, there is a bit of a double-edged sword to them. They almost seem to be edging towards being too perfect. When your eyes look at a dial that is symmetrically balanced, sometimes they gloss over it. By that I mean, the parts that make up the object don't hold your attention long enough. There is nothing to break up the symmetry of the watch. The reasons why I find the Tudor Snowflake to have one of the best dials ever designed on a sports watch is based on the shapes and how they are complementary on the piece. And there is a symmetry to the plots, but the hour hand and the triangle at the 12 manages to break the dial up enough for the eye to focus on it easily. Now the Aqua Terra is extremely well balanced, almost too much so. Imagine if there wasn't an arrow hand to help break up everything. There is a fine line to tread when it comes to making something too clean, but again, it is a double-edged sword. Some eyes can adapt better than others. What would benefit the watch? I would say a marginally thinner case thickness and a smaller case diameter, at least having options for smaller diameters. This watch would be something else if the diameter was drawn between 36 and 39 millimeters instead of the usual 41. Also, is it too much to ask to remove Seamaster from the top of the dial and replace it with the actual underlying name of the watch? But all of that aside, what these watches have been able to do is remarkable. Taking a vintage-inspired piece and spinning it into a modern sports watch that has become an icon of the line. It is very seldom that a new design can situate itself in a position that competes with the likes of some of the top-tier sports watches in the industry. I look at the variations between the pieces, the color and material combinations, the simple layout that always incorporates a date and texture to the dials, but still manages to remain low in profile and proficient enough to be used as a tool or worn formally. The team behind these watches have been given the green light to have fun with them, and some of the latest offerings especially look so good, like the two-tone pieces on rubber straps with deployant clasps. I mean, how cool is that? It is a watch that has embraced the modern era, where its competition continues to rest on its laurels. So the Aqua Terra has the capability of being far more than just a sports watch. It is an example of how to correctly move a classical design into the modern era. And so, like some viewers rightly said, why should you line up and wait for an entry-level Rolex that offers less than one of these pieces? I appreciate both lines on different terms, but we all love a watch that punches above its weight. And this piece to me is one of Omega's secret weapons. A watch that has been worn by James Bond. It can summit mountains, dive in oceans, and cross terrains. It has all the correct design cues that a contemporary sports watch should have, and now houses the latest mechanics that pushes it further than any piece in its price range. In the end, David seems to be beating Goliath in this fight, with a lot more than a sling and a few stones.